At this time, I'm going to go ahead and transfer over to Amy to start our presentation.
Thank you, Shelby, and welcome everyone to the FMLA in the Workplace, Employee Responsibilities and Supervisor's Role. For the purpose of this presentation, supervisor is meant to be any employee that has direct reports. And then this session objectives is to identify the purpose and benefits of FMLA, recognize when and to whom it applies, understand employee and the employer responsibilities, understand consecutive and intermittent FMLA, and understand other types of leave. So what is FMLA? FMLA stands for Family Medical Leave Act. It is a federal law enacted in 1993, and it allows unpaid leave for medical reasons. It does not require the leave to be paid. However, the law does allow employer to apply its own paid leave policies during the time of the leave. And that's what we do. So kind of keep in mind that as FMLA is being protected, that we're requiring our employees to use their accrued paid time concurrently. It does require the maintenance of health benefits. So as that person's on medical leave, the health insurance continues. And then we also have other types of benefits that we continue during their leave as well. So just kind of keep that in mind as we talk about this during our particular session. It does require the employer to notice the employees of their general FMLA information and specific leave information. And lastly on the screen, talks about the guarantees reinstatement to the same or equivalent position. So in other words, as I just stated, it's a protective leave. So who's eligible? Know that USI is an eligible employer. So we are a public agency. So regardless of the number of employees we have, we are eligible to offer it. Now, other employers have to have at least 50 employees within a 75-mile radius. And then for our employees to be eligible for FMLA, they have to work at least a year, not necessarily continuous. And they also have to work at least 1,250 hours during the previous 12 months before they request that leave. And also they must not have maxed out their allowable FMLA time as well before they request it. Reasons for leave. So you as supervisors have, employees that may reach out to you. So there are about 6 reasons why an employee would request a protective leave. And this slide will show you those reasons. And just take a moment to kind of analyze it. We do have the PowerPoint slides for your convenience to have on file. So know that the first 4 reasons are the most popular. And the last 2 are the military family leave. And we're going to get into, as supervisors, it's very important to understand what FMLA is and when an employee may reach out to you if they need leave. So we're going to talk about the serious health condition. So a serious health condition that qualifies for under FMLA is an illness or injury, impairment, or physical or mental condition that involves inpatient care or continuing treatment by a healthcare provider. So in other words, if you have an employee that's hospitalized, if you find out they go to the hospital, you don't necessarily know if they've been admitted or not, but at least if you're aware if they went to the hospital, let me know. During this presentation, it's going to say benefit representative, and it's going to be me on it. So that triggers it. Continuing treatment by a healthcare provider. If the employee is incapacitated for at least 3 full business days, that triggers it. And also any type of follow-up treatment. So if that person has like doctor appointments, even if they're on prescription medication, therapy, that's what's considered a serious medical condition. If an employee is incapacitated due to pregnancy, and if they have chronic conditions where they have at least 2 visits per year. So again, the continuing treatment has to be at least twice a year in order for that to be falling underneath the serious health condition rules on it. This slide here talks about the incapacity. So again, it's the inability to work, attend school, or perform other regular daily activities. know that if an employee has like cosmetic type procedures, they are not serious medical conditions unless they have complications from it. So let's say if an employee's cosmetic procedure, they end up, again, complications, they end up in the hospital, then that end up changes it over to an FMLA situation. So kind of know the difference, regarding that type. Restorative cosmetic surgery after cancer or an injury are covered under FMLA regulations, though. Unless complications arise, usually like a cold, a flu, earaches, upset stomach, everything like showing on this slide is not covered. It's not considered a serious health condition. Again, let's say it's flu season, right? So flu, if it becomes pneumonia, they end up hospitalized, that triggers into a serious medical condition where we need to be aware of that and get that like an FMLA packet that we'll talk about here in a minute. As you guys are aware, we're under a pandemic, under COVID-19. So as you guys have been hearing on the news and with local health experts, it may cause serious medical conditions that an employee may end up in the hospital, either themselves or their family member. So our current COVID-19 leave practice states that employees be isolated or quarantined based on current CDC guidelines. So if your employee is off due to COVID-related leave, and we find out if they end up being like hospitalized and such, and if it's determined under a serious medical condition by the FMLA regs, then we're gonna, I'm gonna have to issue a packet. So it's gonna be very important that you guys let me know in case you hear wind of anything like that happening. Next couple slides, let's kind of talk about reasonable notice. So this is what your employee, their responsibility is. So under FMLA, they need to give us at least 30 days in advance notice if it's foreseeable. So, so if they have like an expected pregnancy, if they have an expected like surgery, way in advance, then yeah, let us know 30 days. But if it's unforeseeable, then as soon as possible. So just make sure they, they try to get it, the information to us either same day, next day. Now, faculty administrative staff usually request more timely notice, if possible, foreseeable, due to the scheduling of that, like futuristic like sessions and terms. We have to have our, as you guys know, schedules in advance. So that's where we need that timely on that, if possible. If you have an employee that calls in and they're saying they're sick or their family member's sick, it doesn't automatically constitute as an automated FMLA. There has to be reasons, as we noted earlier, right? There has to be a serious medical condition. And this slide just talks about like if that employee believes it's an FMLA leave, or if they let you know and contact you of a possible leave, I give them a packet. I give them this FMLA packet that lets them that they have to basically, they have paperwork to turn back in order for us to determine if it is FMLA. So, and this is the employer responsibility slide again. So let's say you as the supervisor, what I'm asking you to do is, if you found out, again, if your employee is hospitalized, let me know. Again, if they miss at least 3 or more full days of business days of consecutive days there. Even if they have an intermittent absence, and we'll talk about intermittent, but let's say they've been off, like they've been taken off like a couple days a week, 1 week, a couple times, whatever, a continuous basis, let me know. If your employee tells you of anything, like if it feels like from our training here, if you feel like, hey, this may fall into FMLA, let me know, and I'll reach out to them to find out, if this appropriate paperwork and that sort of thing. However, you should not solicit any information about what type of illness they may have. So know that if the employee tells you, though, if they divulge that information to you about themselves or for the family member, that's fine. It's just a matter of you can't be asking them specifically if they have something. So how does that help you here? So this slide kind of gives you some like general guidelines, what kind of questions you get asked in a legal way. So again, they do not need to state specifically about their medical condition, but these are the questions you can ask. So what is your general reason for your absence? Are you going to see a medical provider, yourself or family? Have you previously been absent for this reason? And when did you first learn of it? And then when are you expected to return to work? So those are the helpful guides you could use. These types of templates you might want to have around your office as reminders, what you can safely ask. And of course, if you have questions, just let me know as well. I'm always here to help. So next information is, again, this is kind of reiterating, if you or your employee has a pending leave, I send this packet out. It's going to consist of a request form, a certification form, a notice and their rights. We'll talk about that in your next few slides. And why this is important is that the law says the employer has to send out the rights and notice to the employee within 5 business days of their potential absence. So I want to make sure we're compliant. So this is why it's very important that you guys know of any kind of like trigger to let me know on it. Federal law does not require the employee to explicitly assert their rights under FMLA. The fact that you may be aware of their like 3 days, full days, might trigger this 5-day notice obligation. So that's why it's going to be very important to make sure we do this timely on it. This slide gives you the sample, so you should have also the sample PDF version of these documents. So with this one, we just talked about the notice that the employee will receive within that 5 days. It's personalized, so you can see where the employee's information will be filled out. This actually will let them know if they're eligible for FMLA or if they're ineligible for FMLA based on if they've been here a year, their hours, and if they used previous FMLA. So the next information talks about the certification for documentation of the FMLA packet, which is what the healthcare provider will fill out. So your employee's responsibility was once they get this form, they send it to their healthcare provider for them to complete. So there's one version for them and there's one version for their family member. So if it's for themselves, they will have a job description that's inserted in there. And the doctor will have to basically, based on their job description, their essential job functions, is how they're going to determine if their serious medical condition is, if they're able to do their job or not. So the physician does have 15 days to turn this around by law. And then also the last arrow there is comply. The employee has to comply with any kind of second or third medical opinions if we ask that. This is the form. This is the certification form that I just mentioned. On the top right-hand corner is going to be the 15-day deadline that I'm going to personalize whenever I issue those out. So that helps the doctor know when it's due. And on the top page there, top front page, is going to be my information along with the confidential fax number that allows them to turn that back in securely. So again, it's going to be personalized based on your employee's information. The doctor fills out their piece, and then it shows 4 pages. It may be longer than that because what I do, I copy and paste the job description on the last page. So actually, it just may be like 6 or 7 pages at the end when I complete it. So so that's what it looks like on that. This slide kind of helps remind you the confidentiality of medical information. U.S. supervisors are not allowed to reach out to the employee's healthcare provider for any kind of clarification on their certification. You can't do anything on their behalf. Now, I will, as the HR representative, do that. So if I have any kind of questions, I'll follow up with that particular facility. So again, due to confidentiality, I will not be able to divulge any other private information to you. So, so just kind of be aware of that. And then the last piece is the designation side. So that is once we get that certification back from that doctor, then what I do, I have to do the final like approval or denial based on how it's completed on air. So again, the designation notice is what we've sent out to your employee to let them know what's been, what the final stage is. So if it's been approved, it will be completed based again on the certification. It will let them know if it's been certified as a consecutive or intermittent, if it matches what their request is, that sort of thing. Also remind them of their available sick time usage on it. Now, let's say if it's not complete, we have an incomplete or insufficient certification. So what I do, I reach out to the employee and let them know, hey, like question 9, question 10, there's one question, it's just not complete. So I will give the employee the opportunity to rectify it with their healthcare provider. And then that way, and usually it's been like a 7-day turnaround in order for us to get the information to do this final stage. Now, there are times when I do deny it. So the denial reason may be if, let's say if the employee chooses not to do FMLA, they don't turn the certification form back in, I have to close that. So that will be a denial that they will receive on it. The other scenarios I've encountered is if it's a cosmetic procedure. Again, when we mentioned it earlier, cosmetic is not a serious medical condition. So I have done denials for that reason in the past. Now, next slide just lets you know that you as a supervisor, so that way you and your department will know if your employee has been approved or denied based on that certification. So it will show the consecutive, if, once that person's been, when their leave starts and when they're expected to return back to work. Intermittent will also explain the same information your employee will have, is if how often, the frequency, that sort of thing. So that way, in case you have attendance and actually know where why your employee may be calling in. And then that way you can kind of, you have that ability to track your employees, like where they're at. So again, got to reiterate, we will not share the employees or their families' information to you. So just kind of throwing that out like a third time here, but it's very important. This slide information is going to show again the sample of this designation that we just mentioned. So it's about 3 pages, and again, it's personalized based on the employee's info. And you can see where, or at least on your sample that you may end up reviewing, it'll have that section 2 where the additional information is needed in order to do that follow-up. But section 3 is really the approval process, where that's where they're really going to see if it's been approved consecutive or intermittent, that sort of info. Okay, so an employee has been approved. Great. Now, how do I get paid is probably a good common question that you may get if an employee is on FMLA. So if the employee themselves are on leave for their own illness, they have to use their available sick, comp, or vacation. If their position, it has the eligibility for those. So whatever they have accrued is what they're able to use. Now for family members, so if they're off for a family member, then they have up to 150 hours or 20 days per fiscal year. So once they use all that up, then depending on their position, if they have comp or vacation, that's what they'll get into in order to be on a paid status while they're on protected leave. So this information will need to be indicated on the timesheet. So we have to make sure everything matches from beginning to end. So how much leave do they have? Just kind of a reminder, FMLA allows 12 weeks of unpaid leave, right? But how do we determine that? So what we do, we use a rolling 12-month period. So we do not use a calendar. So from January through December, what we use is a rolling 12-month period. So what that means, we begin a calculation from the first day the leave is taken, or each time an employee takes a leave under FMLA, we basically charge it, and then as people are working, it's being credited. So that's why it's considered rolling on it. So know that because only working days are counted toward FMLA, 12 weeks is about equivalent to 60 working days, 450 hours. It's how it's calculated. So again, HR will monitor FMLA, and we will notify your employee and you if they end up being exhausted on it. So we do have in the past employees utilizing it a lot, not only for, it may happen because they're using it for themselves and also for family member. So kind of keep in mind FMLA is for each condition they may have. So some employees may have 2 or 3 FMLAs on themselves. So there may be a lot of usage involved where somebody may end up exhausting it within that rolling calendar year. So how much leave? Okay, we're going to use Tommy as an example. So with this particular slide, Tommy's been approved for any consecutive leave. The year's a little bit off on it, but it's the same concept. So Tommy's been off, he missed November, and he's going to be back probably in February, it looks like. So you can see where Tommy has used all of his 12 weeks. Everything in blue is going to designate everything that he is being applied toward his FMLA protection. On the right-hand side of the slide, you can see where those are the hours, and we typically have 37.5 hours a work week. and 7.5 hours per day, regardless if you're exempt or non-exempt. So kind of keep that as a foundation there. You can see where it's red font, where those are holidays. So anytime the university is closed, or the campus, I should say, is closed, nothing is charged against the employee on. So kind of keep that in mind as anybody that uses it throughout the year. So the next slide is going to show like leaves of absence reports and timesheets. So let's say if Tommy is a exempt, either faculty or administrative staff, you can see on the absence report goes from the middle of the month to the middle of the month. So we're designating those days indicated FMLA in the comment section. Again, we're marking FMLA in that row, FMLA rows. So let's say if Tommy is a non-exempt support staff, those are the blue timesheets, and this is going to show you where Tommy has actually worked. The top portion of this timesheet showing his actual work he worked that week, 37.5. The lower portion of that timesheet is showing when his FMLA begins. So just kind of want to reiterate that once that last leave of absence or timesheet is due, once that person is on a consecutive leave after that point, there's nothing that has to be reported unless there's recaps involved. The recapper just puts down FMLA as a reminder. But I will work with payroll regarding the information that, that we'll know that person's on leave because they have a start date and an end date. So kind of keep that in mind as well. Intermittent leave. So this information is going to let you know that, depending on the person's particular condition, they may be on an intermittent leave for themselves or for their family member. And we do ask employees if they have a planned medical treatment to use minimum disruption for the classroom, office, or department. So what that means is that we, as the employer, are able to request and ask that employee if they can schedule those appointments at the end of their shift. Let's say that works best for the department's operations. We are able to ask that. So don't be afraid to ask that in case something like that happens with your department and somebody's on an approved intermittent leave. So some of these leaves, like intermittent, may require an alternate position that better accommodates their schedule. So those types of requests are going to have to be approved by our HR executive director. And then also for employees to notify their supervisor when they have an absence due to FMLA reason. This slide here just kind of gives you different variations of intermittent leave. Based on that certification I just mentioned to you, it can reflect full days on there, half days. Reduced schedules are usually towards like faculty or administrative staff due to their class schedules. And then as little as a quarter-hour increments can be reflected on there as well. So intermittent leave may be scheduled or unexpected. And let's say if you have an employee that asks time off and it is denied. Let's say their FMLA has been denied and they're still taking that's why they're saying they're off, is due to the FMLA. Then and then they try to use it. So let me know. That's a red flag. That may be an abuse. That may be, hey, they may need something else. We just need some more clarification and a next step involved on that. So let's say your employee may have, like your department may have a call-in procedure, right? So you may have like an absence report hotline or something where, they have to leave a message, or even if you talk to them directly on the phone, text them, FML or email, whatever, they need to report it appropriately. So when they call in, they will need to say probably the following: I will not be able to come in today. This is an FMLA related absence. So they're going to have to know it's an FMLA reason why they're out. So train your employees to say that. So this is very important to make sure we're consistent when people are on an approved FMLA. If they report it correctly from the beginning and throughout, their timesheets until when they, until it ends. So let's say if you have an employee that's on a leave and they are very generic, they don't say FMLA, they just say, I'm not able to come in. You as the supervisor, you have the right to ask them specifically, is this an FMLA sick day? So if you're talking to them on the phone while they're reporting in, or if they text you, you can reply back, ask them, is this FMLA? So if they start divulging their private information about their serious medical condition, stop them. We do not need to know that. You do not need to know that as a supervisor. It's just liability reasons we do not need to know, okay? So we want to make sure, we just want to know how we're going to account their absence. We want to make sure we're recording it correctly. So let's say if you have an employee that may call in during a crisis. That happens, right? We're in a pandemic right now. There may be things going on we just don't know about. An example you may use is, thank you for calling in. Please take care of your situation and let me know when you'll be returning to work. And know that we want to show compassion. We want to show understanding. So we can always follow up later regarding that particular call-in situation. And if you have questions, let me know on it as well. So the continuation of this intermittent leave, how do you record it? So again, as we mentioned, or we're going to mention, the intermittent leave is, let's say this employee misses 1 hour and 15 minutes. It's recordable as 1.25 hours FMLA on their timesheet or leave of absence report. Remember, regardless of what type of employee class you are, if you're faculty, administrative staff, or support staff, regardless, any employee is treated the same. It goes down to 1/4 of an hour. FMLA regulation states that everybody has 12 weeks of unpaid leave that they're protected on. So that's why it has to be recorded and accounted for appropriately. So if the employee is out, you as a supervisor must report that time on their behalf. And then you can always follow up to confirm later on if you have to, if it's like an emergency type flare-up leave. And again, as supervisors, just do a normal procedure on how you do the reporting to the, for the recaps, and make sure the information gets turned into the payroll department. Let's use Janet. Janet has an approved intermittent leave. So based on her certification that we received, she's going to be needing for appointments and episodes 1 to 2 times per month. And so it's up through 6 months is how her certification is approved on. So as you can see on this particular slide, everything in blue is going to be the days that are designated as FMLA. That's the days that she's called in. Those are the days that are reported on her for payroll, for timesheets and such. And you can see there's a couple of days in November, there's some days in December, January, and February. And so she has a total of 54.5 hours out of her 450 hours. That's that 12 weeks, right? Entitlement that she has. So we have, and make sure, as supervisors, you have to make sure it's completed, appropriately. This is the example for intermittent, just like we show for consecutive, but this is going to be intermittent if Janet is either a faculty or administrative staff. This is how her report should show, showing that looks like one full day and 1 hour on hers. So that's what that 7.5 hours is the day, right? So we're adding that 1 for 8.5, and we're marking the FMLA rows on that. But let's say Janet is a support staff or non-exempt person, then that's going to show you for the blue timesheets regarding how that's busted out. And then the next slide, this is what's going to be prohibited as supervisors, as the employer. So as when I say supervisors, you guys are kind of representing the institution, okay? So know that if you guys are making any kind of pre-employment, like committees or anything like that, making any kind of pre-employment decisions, inquiries regarding need for FMLA is prohibited. Asking employees for doctor's notes for each use of intermittent is not allowed either. Supervisors should contact me if you have questions regarding that. Interfering with the employee's rights, retaliating against your employee, or asking employees why they're on FMLA is not allowed by law. Now, next information is going to be your employee responsibility during a leave. So once the once the documentation's been approved and I send a designation out, your employee, if they're on a consecutive leave, they do not have to do a daily call-in. So they have that consecutive approved from the time frame that's designated, protected. They will not need to give us any additional notice unless anything changes. So let's say if they're going to be out longer than expected, they're going to have to let us know. Either if they let you know, make sure I know. So that way we're working as a team and regarding to make sure we get your employee back timely and safely and productively. Employees, again, make sure remain close contact. That's their responsibility. If anything changes, let us know. And then, because there may be further documentation that we may need from them. Next information is our responsibility. Know that according to the courts, there's a professional courtesy that may be permissible. there's a fine line where, there may be pass on the institutional knowledge of documents. Minimal contact may be permissible. That we do not want anything further than that because we do not want to be considered as FMLA interference. The whole point of somebody being off, especially on consecutive or even intermittent, is for that time to be off to get well. They are not, we have to make sure they get back on their feet, and we make sure we have that balance on there. Now, the employee responsibility, we're at the stage where they may be coming back to work. So the return to work documentation. Part of that designation I send to them, I give this language regarding the return to work as a helpful tool where it has their name, reminding them that, this is what they need to ask their doctor. So this documentation is what they request from them because it's released to return to work from their healthcare provider. I call it, release to work documentation is what I call it on my emails. But this is very important for them to come back. We are not allowed to have that employee back to work until we get that. So this information here, this also applies for intermittent and reduced schedule, by the way. The second bullet here is going to say, due to the safety reasons, we may ask that periodically. So just kind of throw that in there. But especially with consecutive. Now, let's say if you have somebody back that came back without it. Well, we have the right to send them home. We have the right to say, hey, you sit here in the waiting area, or we direct them, you're not going to be you cannot work, do not email, do not do anything until I validate that you're safe to come back productively. Because that documentation is going to let us know, especially with this last bullet, it's going to be very important if they have restrictions. What we look for is if they're full duty, no restrictions, means they're able to come back 100% great. If they have restrictions, that tells us, hey, we're going to have to accommodate in some way. So we have to base that on their job description, their essential job functions to make sure there's like either physically or mentally, whatever. We have to work together with work with the department or work with the supervisors to make sure we are able to get that person back. Okay. If you have questions, let me know on that. Now, let's say if an employee has they're not eligible for FMLA. Let's say they have been under a year, they don't qualify yet. That's when we do have a personal leave of absence that we offer. A similar documentation is just like FMLA, and also the time off is similar. Or if your FMLA is, this requires the approval of the department and when I say us, is HR. So there has to be some sort of a pre-approval in order for this employee to have that, what I call PLOA, personal leave of absence. So if they don't qualify for FMLA, or if their FMLA is exhausted. So again, that goes outside of that FMLA protection. So that means their job is no longer protected by law. Okay, it's not guaranteed that their job will be there. So we're going to do the best we can on getting that person back on their feet, though. Okay. We're going to work with them. So as you can see right there, it kind of gives you the time frame that we look for in order to make sure we could try to get that to happen. Last bullet there, positions for faculty members may be held on a semester by semester basis. Now, last here is ADA accommodations. I mentioned about the release to return to work documentation. ADA stands for the American Disability Act. So this is where the accommodation portion comes in. And there may be additional paperwork involved, and also there, if anybody that needs ADA, let us know, and then that way we can work with you and your department regarding that. Now, questions about leaves. Well, we do have our information and policies in our handbook for your convenience, and then my information is listed on here as well. Due to confidentiality, I am asking you at this time if you have questions at the end here. That may be specific. You could do a one-on-one later, so we can do a phone conference or virtual meeting that works with your schedule. Also listed on here is Wendy Seitz. She's the HR manager of benefits, and if I'm unavailable, like on vacation, she is my backup on it. So I'll take this on over to Shelby, and hopefully we can have some questions in. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. So yes, at this time, I'd like to go ahead and get the question and answer session started. So please submit any questions that you have into that chat window if you haven't already, and we'll answer as many questions as time allows. I have gotten a couple in, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with the first one, but please go ahead and submit more questions if you have more. So Amy, does FMLA paperwork only become a factor or a need if the employee has the potential to run out of sick and vacation time?
FMLA should not be used for an attendance policy. So let's just clear that up. We have to make sure the law states that if the person is off at least 3 consecutive days, that could be a potential FMLA situation. So so those are the things we kind of have to think about. We kind of have to separate that mindset on there. It is to protect the job though. So I mean, we shouldn't use it for like one day if somebody's going to be out and it may affect their attendance policy, if that's where the question is asking. We just need to make sure because again, it's a serious medical condition. There's just different qualifiers I have to look at. But in case you have questions, feel free to reach out to me regarding if you have an employee that may fall into a specific question that you're wanting me to address.
Okay, thank you. All right, so our next one's kind of a multi-part. I'm going to paraphrase just a little bit here for our purpose of this recording. So are supervisors solely responsible for communicating the FMLA option to employees, or can the benefits office communicate this information instead? Along with that communication piece, is the FMLA paperwork optional? Should supervisors be reviewing the amount of sick and family sick time, excuse me, that employees have available before initiating the conversation about FMLA?
I would say I'm going to use you guys as a collaborative effort because it is like one of the things we as an institution need to make sure supervisors are educated regarding at least some FMLA like knowledge. So if I'm not saying for you to go into it with them, but if you feel like that they're approaching you regarding like any kind of like leave or medical situation without divulging too much information, yeah, definitely direct them to me regarding appointments and to make sure I address their particular situation on it. Because that's solely my responsibility to make sure I get that packet to them. So I'm hoping answering that question there.
So Amy, once a packet is initiated, if the employee does not want to take FMLA, would like to use their sick and family sick time instead, is the FMLA paperwork optional?
By law, I think the law states that we have to charge FMLA. So it's going to be very important to make sure that's charged correctly in order for us to make sure we're compliant.
Are there situations where the benefits office would initiate the communication to the employee before the supervisor would? Is there something that you guys check on consecutive absences on your end?
So are they saying if I'm aware of it and the supervisor may not be?
Correct.
Yes, then what I do once I receive notification from an employee regarding a request, part of that packet information, there's a cover letter, and that cover letter will state it is your responsibility to make sure you let your department, your supervisor and department know at this time that you're requesting FMLA. So we do try to make sure, at least I try to make sure the department knows and aware that somebody may be out. So we are trying to work together on it. So I do the best that I can once I'm aware of something, and I try to educate the employee to make sure that's their responsibility to make sure they let their department know as well.
If the employee is allowed 3 days a month of FMLA leave and uses 5, do they contact you?
Yes, that's a good question. So let's say if you feel like if we see a pattern, so if we see a pattern where an employee may be using more than what we were aware of, right? What they just stated, that may be considered an abuse, or they may, or it may be something where if they need more time, that we need to make sure we may have to redo what's called a recertification. So that recertification will give to the employee in order for them to apply to their doctor in order in case they get certified, that person needs more time off than what was initially designated as.
So for this example, the employee is a father. Are we required to allow this father the full 12 weeks leave for the birth of a child? And what options do we have in this scenario?
Sure. Let's talk more about in our 11 o'clock with our employee rights and responsibilities. That information is going to reflect, yes, as a father, they have rights under FMLA to bond with their baby. And so just know that if the wife and the husband both are employees of USI, they have a combined 12 weeks together. But if he's the only one working here, he has up to 12 weeks he may take to bond with his baby. Yes.
Thank you, Amy. If anybody else has any other questions, please go ahead and submit those. I've run at the end of what's been submitted already. We still got about 3 or 4 minutes left, so we can still take another question or two. If anyone has anything else they would like to ask, you can go ahead and add that into the chat window. All good questions, guys. Appreciate all of the feedback and participation that we've gotten so far. Any other questions from anyone? In the meantime, Amy, is there anything additional that has come up from these questions that you wanted to elaborate more on or anything?
Just basically, we're just going to work together regarding it as supervisors and departments. If there's anything you have questions on, feel free to let me know. Email me. We could do virtual appointments. Anything you guys may have questions on, because every scenario is different. Every FMLA case, there's no cookie cutter way of looking at it. So, and I just kind of want to reiterate due to the COVID-19 to make sure if anybody has any type of employees that may be off, either for themselves or even caring for a family member. I've had that so far. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that it falls into, like, if it's a serious medical condition, we could get that time off to care for that approved family member.
So back to that example with the father's leave to the birth of a child, does the father's leave need to be consecutive?
Yes. Our parental leave policy is consecutive. We as the employer chose not to do intermittent or reduced scheduling for any kind of paternity leave policy. So that's a good question. We do have a parental leave policy on top of that. So we have 10 days of consecutive leave that an employee may use concurrently, but I do mention that in the next meeting at 11 o'clock. So those are good questions.
Great, thank you. Well, if anyone has any additional questions, please reach out to Amy. She'd be happy to assist you guys. We're going to go ahead and call this the end of the meeting today. Thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate everyone participating, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Have a good day.